Lord, you spoke to your prophets of old. You spoke to Habakkuk. He didn't like what he had to say, but you told him the truth. And then what we hear today is that he accepted it. And Lord, we want to hear from you too, even if you tell us things that we don't want to hear. But Lord, I don't want to tell these people anything. I want you to speak to us. So show us only what you want us to see. Tell us only what you want us to hear. Give us only what you want us to have. Stand in my shoes. Give me your thoughts. Speak with my mouth so that we hear from the one true God what he wants to say to his people. We pray this in the name of Jesus, through the power of your Spirit, for the glory of God our Father. Amen. So Pastor Doug gets to bring this Habakkuk plane into a landing next week. And we did a little bit in chapter 1, then we did chapter 1 and all of chapter 2, and now we're in the first 15 verses of chapter 3. And there's just something to acknowledge in this book, this prophet, reminder that it says the oracle that Habakkuk received. Oracle in this sense means burden. So God gave him a burden that he had to carry, and it was to carry it on behalf of the people and also to carry it to the people. So you'll remember that Habakkuk cried out to God in chapter 1 and basically saying, Lord, your people are supposed to be better than this, and you're letting them do this. I mean, they had a king, Jehoiakim. There was Jehoiakim and Jehoiakim, and they were both. Jehoiakim was he was a sellout to Necho, an Egyptian king, and then Nebuchadnezzar from Babylon beat that king, and he installed his own guy, Jehoiakim. And so Habakkuk is looking at the one who's supposed to, the king of the country, so one who's supposed to represent God to the people. And actually, he's not just doing what's in his best interest with Nebuchadnezzar. He's sold out to Nebuchadnezzar, and he's instituting Nebuchadnezzar's will in Judah. And by the way, last week I said Judah, Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and then I said the Golan Heights. I don't know why I do that. I did it when I was in Israel. For some reason, West Bank and Golan Heights, to me, they're interchangeable. I know they sound nothing alike, but the West Bank of the Jordan River, Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and below, that was Judah. So sorry about that. It's one of the problems with me not having notes. The things that go on in my head come out of my mouth, and sometimes they're inaccurate. What we said as the message was not inaccurate, but that little piece was. So Jehoiakim, he's supposed to represent God to the people. He's supposed to listen to the priesthood. He's supposed to do what God would have him do, and instead he decided to do what Nebuchadnezzar would have him do, and that was bring foreign gods in, that was worship foreign gods, that was pervert the temple, pervert justice, as it says in the last little line of his first complaint. So he says to God, why are you letting this happen? And God goes, no, I see it. I see it, and I'm going to judge it. And I'm going to judge it by using a people that's even worse than you guys are right now. And Habakkuk goes, no, that's not what I was wanting. That's not what I was asking. And God goes, it's even worse than you think. It's going to be even harder than you think. I'm going to judge you with a worse kingdom, and you're going to go there for 70 years. I'm going to let them destroy everything, even my own house. I'm going to let them destroy it. And you're going to go there for 70 years, and I'm going to change the world. Through you, as I judge you and punish you, you're going to be a light to this other nation, to the most powerful demon-worshiping king on the planet, and he's going to issue a decree that gives me glory. So God always has a bigger picture in mind. He was giving Habakkuk and the people of God his 70-year vision for them. Now, the cool thing about the book of Habakkuk, if you've ever grieved the loss of someone, you go through these steps, these waves of feeling isolated, kind of in denial, it can't really be true, and then anger and bargaining kind of come back and forth, and then you go through these processes and you come to the place of acceptance. You can see all of that in the book of Habakkuk. No, God, this can't be true, this can't be true, this can't be true. Why are you letting it be true? Would you please do something? There's even a request in this particular spot, this spot where he's starting to come to acceptance. There's even one plea in that in this prayer, the song that they used for worship, and that is this: in your wrath, remember mercy. And so that's kind of the chorus of a song. And I just want to tell you, I won't read it this way, I'll only do it once, but every time you see in this passage this little word over on the right-hand side of a column, Selah, what that means, this is a prayer that was sung in worship. So there's the chorus, that's the first part, and then there's a verse, there's an announcement of a verse, what the verse is going to be about. Then you sing the chorus again, then you sing the verse, and then you hear the announcement of the next verse, you sing the chorus, and you go from there. So that's how it was done publicly, but they only list the chorus, the first part right at the beginning, once. But musicians know if there's a refrain or something like that, you come back to it. So it reads like this. This is when he's coming to acceptance. Doug gets the fun part next week. A prayer of Habakkuk the prophet on, I'm not even going to try that word. Lord, I have heard of your fame. I stand in awe of your deeds, O Lord. Renew them in our day. In our time, make them known. In wrath, remember mercy. God came from Teman, the Holy One from Mount Paran. Then it goes to the chorus. Lord, I have heard of your fame. I stand in awe of your deeds, O Lord. Renew them in our day. In our time, make them known. In wrath, remember mercy. His glory covered the heavens, and his praise filled the earth. His splendor was like the sunrise. Rays flashed from his hand, where his power was hidden. Plague went before him. Pestilence followed his steps. He stood and shook the earth. He looked and made the nations tremble. The ancient mountains crumbled, and the age-old hills collapsed. His ways are eternal. I saw the tents of Cushan in distress and the dwellings of Midian in anguish. Were you angry at the rivers, Lord? Was your wrath against the streams? Did you rage against the sea when you rode with your horses and your victorious chariots? You uncovered your bow. You called for many arrows. That's the announcement of a verse. Then you go back to the chorus. You split the earth with rivers. The mountains saw you and writhed. Torrents of water swept by. The deep roared and lifted its waves on high. Sun and moon stood still in the heavens at the glint of your flying arrows, at the lightning of your flashing spear. In wrath you strode them through the earth, and in anger you threshed the nations. You came out to deliver your people, to save your anointed one. Just so you know, the anointed one, we usually hear that. We think it's in reference to Jesus. It was also how they, in the Old Testament, how they referred to God's people. He ordained them to be his people. They were the anointed nation, the anointed one. All right, well, okay, there we go. You crushed the leader of the land of wickedness. You stripped him from head to foot. And then announcement of the next verse. With his own spear, you pierced his head. When his warriors stormed out to scatter us, gloating as though about to devour the wretched who were in hiding, you trampled the sea with your horses, churning the great waters. Very poetic, seemingly very violent. And there's a couple of things that we'll get into some specifics because the people, everything that he talks about here reminds the people of something God has done. And there are some of these things that we kind of go, really, you pierced his head with his own spear? Well, think of it this way, yes, that could be an allusion to a war, but these false gods, remember Baal, and Molech, and I want to make sure I say her name right for that time. It's just not real, but Ashtoreth, which is Ishtar, which is also known by several other names, but that was the goddess that they worshipped that confused. She was a goddess of fertility and sexuality, and she confused men to think they're women and women to think they're men, that kind of thing. And then you have Baal and Molech. They were about prosperity and provision, but also required people to murder their own children, to sacrifice them to them. And so when you think about this piercing your own, think of it this way. When God called those things to go down, when he, and we'll get into a little bit more of that in a minute, but when he took down those idols, when he took down those altars, they fell over, and under their own weight, they broke into pieces. We hear about this time and time again. That's what he's saying. By their own weight, their heads, what they were about was destroyed. When it talks about the heavens, the sun and the moon stood still, but your ways are eternal. He's not necessarily, and I don't know, I wasn't there. I don't know if the sun and the moon stood still in the sky, but this is allegory, allusion language that was common in the ancient Semitic cultures, that God is the one who uses nature, the God is the one who uses nature to rule over all. And we'll give many examples of that in just a moment, but these false gods, these idols, these lesser than things, they can't control anything. Remember when he called out and said, what a fool it is to stand in front of something you made with your own hands. You breathe, you speak, you teach, you do. That's just foolish. That's what he's saying, that God is the one who uses nature to do his own bidding. And we'll get example after example of that right here. When he talks in the first couple of verses there, he talks about Teman and Paran. So we don't know where those places are, but the people of Israel did. It would be like me saying to you, the kingdom of Judah, the kingdom of Israel, or Galatia, or Ephesus, those are things that we hear about. We might not know where they are on the map, but that's part of our tradition. The Jewish people, their tradition, what they remembered at Passover, what they remembered in all their festivals, are the great deeds that God has done. And so when they hear Teman, they know that that's southern Palestine. They know that that's just on this side of the Sinai Peninsula. That's where God had them wander around in the desert. And the Paran, that's the mountains. That's where God gave his commandments. That's where God started forming these people who don't even know they're going to be God's people. He starts turning them into God's people. It was after he rescued them from Egypt. When he rescued them from Egypt, he brought plagues and pestilence to that kingdom so that they would let God's people go. And God's people went, and imagine this just for a moment, that you're set free after generation upon generation of slavery. You're set free, and you don't know where you're going, but you know there's a guy out in front with a stick, and he's saying, follow me, and you go and follow, and you come up against the sea. Then you find out that Pharaoh changed his mind, and he sends his army after you, and just before they slaughter you, God does something miraculous. He actually opens up the sea. You walk across on dry land, and then he uses the sea to kill Pharaoh's army. You would think that would be something significant in your life, and they did. They remembered it. But then soon thereafter, when God takes his leader, sends him up the mountain, gives him his law that they are not supposed to pervert, his leader comes down, and they made a cow that they're bending down and worshiping. He's reminding them of what God has done, how God has intervened, and the ways that God uses not only the people of God to be a light to the nations, to be a city on a hill, but he's also reminding them of how he's intervened throughout history. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. In Exodus 14 and 15, he uses a cloud, fire, darkness, and a sea to deliver them. He used an earthquake in Jericho. We'll get back to that in a moment. In Judges 5, God used torrential rains. In 1 Samuel 7, he used a thunderstorm to rout the enemy. David consolidated his power over the Philistines in 2 Samuel 5 at Yahweh's direction, but God also used a wind to help him win over in that situation. In 2 Kings chapter 18 and 19, a plague defeated the Assyrian army that absolutely would have taken the city of Jerusalem. And then there's what God did with the judge Deborah, what God did all throughout Isaiah. He talks about this. This whole passage is reminding them of how God is the God of nature, God is the God of creation, and he goes before, he comes alongside, and he comes up behind his people to make sure that he delivers them to accomplish the purposes that God has sent them to accomplish. And he's reminding Habakkuk is reminding the people, because Habakkuk came to the conclusion that even though I'm not going to get what I want, God is still faithful. God gave Habakkuk and Jeremiah and Nahum, he told them all, this is what's coming. Why would God tell them what's coming if it wasn't something he wanted them to know? And he's telling them that I'm going to do something, you won't even believe it if I tell you. I'm going to do something remarkable, but you're going to go through tough times. I want you to picture one other thing. And this is, hopefully you'll get a picture of what I'm getting at the end here. But think of Jericho. The people of God are coming into the promised land after wandering around the desert for 40 years. And God tells them to do something absolutely ridiculous. You've heard me say this before. But militarily speaking, two things: you don't be predictable. Don't show them how many soldiers you have and what weaponry you have. okay? That's just don't, right? Because you want them to be afraid that you're coming instead of, oh, yeah, we got this. It's a fortified city, and God, he uses this unexpected, non-warring people to do an impossible thing in a seemingly ridiculous way. Remember, he tells them every day for 7 days, I want you to take all of your fighting men with trumpet, and I want you to walk around the city. So predictable, show them who they're up against, and they weren't scary because they'd just been wandering around the desert for 40 years. And on the 7th day, I want you to walk around 7 times. So he took the predictability, letting them know what armature you had, and then he wears them out. And then scream. And you'll win. God uses unexpected people to do impossible things in ridiculous ways. And you know who the unexpected people are today? Me and you. He wants to use an unexpected people to do an impossible thing in a ridiculous way. I'll give you an example. I did a wedding yesterday. Really enjoyed it. Great couple. Like them a lot of fun. Did the premarital with them. Just love them. But it occurred to me in the wedding, and I actually said it, which probably wasn't all that wise, but at a wedding, women are all dressed up in white, right? They're just beautiful. They have attendants help them go to the bathroom that day. When's the last time you had someone help you go to the bathroom? And it was something of you being honored instead of in the hospital or something like that. It's all about the bride. She's all made up. She looks beautiful. She spends weeks trying to make sure that she's going to fit just right and everything. Everyone's there just to tend to her, and no one's looking at anybody else. They're all looking at the bride. In fact, she walks in with her dad alone, and everyone stands and turns and looks. But when they were standing up there in front of me yesterday in the Mosaic Worship Center, I'm like, it's kind of funny that women, are they beautiful, and they're all dressed up, and the focus is on them, and a man is wearing the same thing at his wedding that he wears at his funeral. And that's not a bad thing. Because a man, according to Scripture, Ephesians chapter 5, if you read that passage about husbands and wives, go up one verse just before that, because it says, out of reverence for Christ, submit lovingly to one another. Wives, here's how you submit. Men, here's how you submit. But he describes, there's these 2 or 3 lines for the wife, and there's this paragraph for the men. See, a man, I didn't know this. I mean, I knew it intellectually, but I had no idea how all-encompassing it would be. When a man gets married to a woman, he dies. He dies to himself. That is God's call. He's supposed to be responsible for her well-being, for her spirit, for her soul. In fact, how she looks over time will be dependent in part on how well he treats her. There's an old saying that the measure of a man is the countenance on his wife's face. And it is glorious that God calls men, you got to stop doing only what you want. Your money isn't just for you anymore. You're going to work for the well-being of others, for your wife first, and then if the Lord so blesses, for children. Your needs are going to come second. It's going to be what you're supposed to do for them is representative of what Christ does for us. In fact, Paul, the author of 2/3 of the books of the New Testament, he could have chosen any institution to represent the relationship between our Savior and his people. He could have used an economic institution. He could have used a political institution. He could have used a judicial institution. But what he chose is bridegroom and bride. And if you look at the scriptures in Philippians chapter 2, we hear that Jesus did not consider equality with God something to be held on to, but took on the nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. He was obedient to death, even death on a cross, that he was willing to die so that his bride would be made holy and pure and blameless and blemishless before God. That is what Habakkuk is reminding us of, what God has done, how he has intervened, what he has done, and we don't remember all these Old Testament things that well. We don't know Tehran and, I don't know what the other one is, Peron, and we don't know all these other gods and goddesses really, but we do remember Jesus, and that's who we should remember. We're supposed to remember how God has intervened. And no matter, come what may, sooner or later, God will tear down the false idols. He will tear down the sexual confusion. He will tear down the sacrifice of children. He will tear down us thinking that something we've made is there to make us more prosperous. He will tear it down. He always has, and he will do it again. And he may be doing it now. But what is the call of God to his people? I want you to be my bride. I want you to only be thinking of me. And folks, I'm going to poke the bear here for a second, but I don't know if you noticed, but there's an election coming up. Seems like a sequel, doesn't it? Some of you will get angry with me in the next year, and that's okay, because you'll want me to politicize the pulpit. But I won't do it. And I'm going to tell you why. Because Habakkuk didn't do it. He didn't complain about Jehoiakim specifically, and that he was a sellout, and that he had some other country's interests in mind over the interests of his own people. He didn't go into that. He just said, God, don't let this happen. And God goes, I'm not going to let it happen, but it's going to be worse than you think. But what we think, and there are good things and there is the good thing. There are good things in our lives, and they are good, but they aren't the supreme good. They're not the ineffable one. They're not the one by which we define goodness. It is my job, in fact, I'm sinning against you if I do not do it. It's my job to point you to the ineffable one, to the one who defines goodness, to the one who defines love, to the one who defines humanity. It's my job to point you to that. Anything less than that, I sin against you by telling you that that is the most important thing. It is not, and it can't be. In fact, anything that isn't God that we try to make number one, it will rule you. These false gods ruled those people, and it destroyed lives. God is not a destroyer of lives. God is a savior of lives. And God wants his people to remember that he died for us so that we will voluntarily submit ourselves to his will, that we will live the prayer that Jesus taught us to pray. Your will be done on earth just as it is in heaven. So men, love your wives. Women, it tells you in Scripture, it never tells a woman to love her husband. It tells them to respect him, to show each other love and respect. It is God's call first here. But if every one of us lived the way God called us to live, and then we gather together to live the way God calls us to live, we become something that God always wanted his people to become. We become hope for the nations. We become salt and light. We become that city on a hill that people look at and they go, something's different with those people. We're not here, as Pastor Doug told us about a year ago. It still bothers me that he came up with it and I didn't. But we're not here to make the world a better place. We're here to be the better place. We're here to be the better people. And how are we doing? I hope to God we're taking that seriously. I hope to God we're remembering what God has done. That's what Habakkuk does when he comes to the acceptance that it's going to get ugly. He remembers what God has done. He remembers who God was, because that's who God is, and that is who God will be tomorrow. What about you? What about me? I don't know what's coming. But has God not intervened in your life at one time or another? Has he not come through? He didn't give me what I wanted all the time, because my will isn't perfect. His is. And that's why Jesus in the garden says, take this from me, if there's any other way, but not what I want, Father, what you want. Remember. And if you're thinking right now, like, I don't remember a time he actually intervened and came through. You're saved, aren't you? You were doomed. You're going to die. All I do is sell fire insurance. You're not going to burn. Because of what? Because of God's intervention for you, his person in history. He came to die so that you don't face death the way all other humanity does. God has intervened, and God does save, and he still cares. He's not done yet. And he wants to use you. He wants to use us. He wants to use his bride. He wants her to be blemish-free and beautiful so that all eyes are on her, because she points to Jesus. So I plead with you, remember who God is. Remember what he's done. Come what may, be confident, be calm, and be faithful. Remember that Scripture says, in your wrath, God, remember mercy. Lord, while you're punishing us, love us. And remember what God said in the last chapter? He said, the righteous will live by faith. And that's not just faith. It's the righteous who will remember the faithfulness of God and live accordingly. Let's do that. Come what may, whether the world blows up or whether God intervenes with this third great awakening in the United States and Western civilization, whether everybody, one day something happens and the sun doesn't go down and everyone falls to their knees and God gives us all a sense of how he sees our sin and we all go, oh God, I repent. That would be wonderful. But what if he doesn't? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Our God can save us from the fiery furnace, and he will. But even if he doesn't, I'm not bending my will, I'm not bending my knee to that false thing that is not the immutable one, the ineffable one, the omnipotent one, the omniscient one, the one who is the Ancient of Days. I'm not doing it. Day to day, I shouldn't do it, and in the big moments, I shouldn't do it. But the way I'm supposed to stay on track, I'm not telling you I do it, is to remember what God has done already and believe that God isn't done and he's going to continue the way he always has. He's going to set his people up to be seen by the world, to show how great God is. So remember, let's pray. Lord, we are an unexpected people that you're calling to do an impossible thing in a seemingly ridiculous way. You're going to save the world, but you asked us to represent you well here until you do. That is a huge task, Lord, and we cannot change the world. But we can be faithful to you, and you can change the world. So help us have courage, to be calm, to be confident, and to always point to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.